So if you'll come forward now, we'll be glad to listen to what he has.
How long, Pressure? How long do I have? How long do I have? Oh, you don't want to preach?
We won't hear from us.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good morning.
Morning.
It's a privilege to be at Temple Baptist Church this morning. We are blessed indeed in America. Most Americans do not understand how blessed we really are. I was actually on my way somewhere else, and I came by and I saw Temple Baptist Church, an independent fundamental, and I said, that's for me.
Amen.
And so here I am. It's nice to meet you folks, and hope I can see you again sometime. I have been in the West Virginia area for many years. My wife's father and her grandmother were from Beckley, and my wife's mother was from Texas. They met at Tennessee Temple University in Chattanooga years ago, long time ago. And they went to Bolivia, South America, as missionaries. And they were actually the very first missionaries ever in the country of Bolivia, South America, back when the Catholic priests were inciting riots and getting the people to throw buckets of urine on them in the streets for preaching the gospel. And so when I met my wife, her name is Carolyn. Her father was John Gunner. He just passed away just a few weeks ago, and after 46 years in Bolivia. And when I first met my wife there at Tennessee Temple University in Bible College, she said, "You're going to be a pastor, right?" I said, "That's the plan." And she said, "As long as you're not going to be a missionary," because she had had her fill of that. And so she didn't want to travel. She wanted the American dream. She wanted a nice house and a white picket fence and a dog and so forth and so on. But she didn't want to travel. And so for about 12 years, I was a pastor. And I started the church that I pastored. Then I started several others out of that church. And then we had a tragedy, and a terrible tragedy. And that led me to start a ministry called Solid Rock Youth Ministries. And it was in upstate New York. It was all over New York State. Governor Pataki asked me to be, even though I'm from Virginia. Now, I may sound like a Yankee to you this morning, but I'm from Virginia. But I've been up there 24 years, and when I'm not in Burma, that's where our house, our home is, and our church, our sending church. We're from the Lighthouse Baptist Church of Horseheads, New York, which is Elmira area, Corning, New York, along the Pennsylvania border, northern Pennsylvania border, southern New York border, in upstate. And so, which by the way is all farms and mountains and lakes and waterfalls. It's not New York City at all. But anyway, God led me to start Solid Rock Youth Ministries, and I was still pastoring at that time. Then Governor Pataki in the state of New York asked me to be the state chaplain to the Office of Children and Family Services. And we were preaching the gospel in youth detention centers all around the state of New York. Well, then we got into New Jersey, and then we got into Massachusetts, and God led us to train teams ministering to troubled young people all over America, from here to California and back. And we recorded about 60,000 young people making public professions of faith in Christ over 16 years.
Amen.
And it was during that time, in 2008, I got an email from a jungle tribal pastor in Old Burma, which is now called Myanmar. And Myanmar is is between India and Thailand, south of China, on the exact other side of the planet. And so when I received this email, he said that this pastor, this jungle pastor, he said, I have 60 young people who are starving to death. He said, I have 60 orphans who are getting a spoonful of rice every other day. We have to decide who will eat and who will not eat. He said, you have a ministry. I heard about your ministry. And I'm thinking, how did he hear about my ministry in Burma? But he said, heard about your ministry online, and we did have a website. We had a toll-free hotline all over America and Canada, and counselors online, and so forth. And so he said, I heard about your ministry. He said, you help troubled young people. Will you help ours? And I thought it was a scam. I thought, and I had my finger on the delete button, and I said, Lord, what about this? And God spoke to my heart, and I could not delete that email.
Amen.
So I wrote him an email back. I answered him, and I said, give me your testimony of salvation and your doctrinal statement from the Scriptures. And I couldn't say King James Bible because they're Burmese. They speak Burmese. It's the Judson Bible over there from Adoniram Judson, our first missionary ever in America, back in 1813. And so I thought, that'll do it. I'll never hear from this guy again. But in 4 days, I received something that was so detailed, so scriptural, so organized, that I began to correspond with this pastor, and then I began to support him. And I went to my wife and I said, we need to support this man. She said, okay. And I said, we're going to give him $200 a month out of our own pocket. Not out of Solid Rock Youth Ministries, just out of our own hip pocket. And she said, I remember her words. She said, okay, brain surgeon. She said, even if God gives us that money, because I told her, she said, how are we going to get that money? I said, God's going to give it to us, and then we're going to give it to him. She said, okay, brain surgeon, even if God gives us the money, how are we going to get it to him over there? And I said, I don't know. But God made a way.
Praise the Lord.
And so I sent $200 US to a man that I had no idea who he was, a man I'd never met before in my life in Singapore. Then that man I'd never met in Singapore, he sent the money to a man that I'd never met in Bangkok, Thailand. Then that man in Bangkok, Thailand sent the $200 to someone I didn't know in Rangoon, Burma, city of 9 million Buddhists and Muslims, with 10,000 temples and idols. It's a land completely given over to idolatry. And that man in Rangoon sent it to a little general store in a place called a little village in the middle of the country, 12 hours north, called Onglang. And Pastor Tang Wen-yi came out of the village, hiked out of the village 15 miles on foot, picked up his money and got every single penny.
Amen.
How does that happen?
Thank God. Amen.
And I thought, God, you must be in this.
Amen.
And so 6 months or so, he had been sending me pictures of these children. Well, Miss Meadows, I fell in love. And I just couldn't, it was unbelievable. They were beautiful children, but they were orphans. And they were orphans because of the Burmese military dictatorship for the last 60 years in that country. We have Burmese refugees here in America in 185 cities by the hundreds of thousands because of that brutal military dictatorship. Since 1962, the country has been totally closed to the entire world, cut off. And so I fell in love with these children, and so he said, Brother Bob, what would hinder you from coming and visiting us in our country? I said, your government. But God gave me a visa.
Praise God.
And there were 6 other preachers that said, we'll go with you. I said, fantastic. They all backed out. And And so there was this little old lady in the Adirondacks upstate New York. And she put her bony finger right in my chest and she said, Brother Bob, she said, I think that God always meant for you to go by yourself. Thanks a lot. You know? And so I got on a plane and flew from Detroit, Michigan to Tokyo, Japan. And I asked the stewardess, I said, exactly how long is this flight? She said, it never ends. And I think I believed her. After 14 hours, we finally landed in Tokyo. And then 6 hours later, I got on another plane that flew to Bangkok. And I thought it was just a hop, skip, and a jump, but it was 6 hours again on another plane. Then I stayed on a counter stool in a sandwich shop because it was the only place that was free. I mean, people were laying on the floors, they were on, every seat was taken. Finally, I found this one counter stool about 3 o'clock in the morning where I could sit down in the Suvarnabhumi International Airport in Bangkok, Thailand. And I stayed there for 9 hours on that counter stool. Then I got on an Airbus A220, 320 rather, and narrow body plane, and flew another 3 hours from Bangkok to Rangoon, got off the plane, and the man in front of me, they searched everything he had. Now, I was carrying contraband. My suitcase was full of scriptures and gospel tracts. And I actually had two. I had my own suitcase and then one I was just going to throw away, and it was full of gospel tracts and English Bibles, you know. And so I didn't know. I mean, I'd heard of Adoniram Judson. Most Baptists have. But I'd never heard, I didn't know anything about Burma or the Burmese people. And so when I got off the plane, they went through the luggage of the man in front of me and behind me and never one time even looked at me, just let me go through.
Well, bless the Lord.
And I thought, Lord, you must be in this thing.
Amen.
I literally stood on a street corner one day with several soldiers that were looking at me like food. Because every street corner, every intersection had military soldiers with AK-47s in their hands. Not on their shoulder, but in their hands. Looking up and down the street, there were truckloads of soldiers. 2 bombs went off in the city while I was there, one that rocked my hotel. And I stood on that street corner at night, looked up into the stars, and I said, okay, God, I'm here. I obeyed you. I know I was supposed to come, but I don't know why. What do you want from me? And so I was in a garage, and I had 60 people sitting on bamboo mats on the floor in front of me, and as I was teaching them with Pastor Tengwani, he had come down from Onglan, and we weren't supposed to go to his place until the following week. So he was interpreting me. I preached that first week, I preached in over a dozen underground churches. And so I'm in this garage, and there's 60 people sitting on the floor in front of me, and I've got my Bible open, and Pastor Tane is interpreting into the Burmese. And all of a sudden, 2 men jumped up, and they ran up front and grabbed me by both arms and took me out the back door and down a flight of steps and into a cold, dark, wet basement, shoved me down into a corner, started throwing boxes and boards and all kinds of debris on top of me and said, shh. Then I heard all kinds of yelling and scurrying around and bumping and banging upstairs in that garage. And when the soldiers and the local police had left, because some government informer had called and said, foreigner doing something he shouldn't do. When they left, those 2 men came back downstairs, dug me out of my corner, took me back up the stairs into the garage, put me in front of the people and said, please continue.
Praise the Lord.
Just like that. And so the first of the week, Pastor Tainwini and I hired a driver in a car, and we got up. We got up very early, and we got into this 1972 Toyota Corolla with natural air conditioning between your legs, where you could see the road going by. And we went up the PA highway, which was dirt and gravel and dust, along the Ayeyarwady River, which is like the Mississippi of Burma. And we started up there about 7 o'clock. By 11 o'clock, the car had broken down 6 times. But the driver kept fixing it, and we'd keep going on. And so by 4 o'clock, we stopped for a little something to eat at a place, and they had fried sparrow, which was a little bat. They had fried bat and other things that you don't want to know about. Everything in this world doesn't taste like chicken. And so, anyway, we kept going. And 4:30 in the morning, the next day, we finally arrived in Ongland. We got out of that little Toyota Corolla, unfolded our appendages, and walked down a gully and into the jungle and on a path and kept going. And about an hour walk, and finally got to the compound where Pastor Tainwini had these 60 orphans. And there was about 200 people that were waiting. And they'd been waiting all night because we were supposed to get there the night before. And I didn't know. So the first thing we did, I'm exhausted. I want to go to bed, but I had to preach. Finally, I got about 2 hours sleep, and they came and got me. They said, Baji, we have meeting. Brother Bob, we have meeting. And so I got back up. The pavilion and this place where they met was filled with people again, hundreds. And I preached again. By 3 o'clock, I was getting ready to preach the 4th time that day, that afternoon, when the soldiers and the police came and demanded my passport and put me in handcuffs and hauled me out of there and took me to jail. And I'm not trying to be a hero or anything, preacher, but I got to tell you, I really had a peace.
Praise God.
I was not afraid. I wasn't nervous. I just talked to these people as best as I could, you know, and I wasn't afraid, Brother Grady. I just had this uncanny peace because I knew that this wasn't my idea, folks. I didn't dream this up. You know, I was there in Burma because God sent me. And so after a couple of days and many interrogations, they released me. They said, you must go back to Rangoon. I said, well, I want to go on to Mandalay. They said, no, you must go back to Rangoon. And so I had already learned, hobi, hobi, hobi. Okay, okay, okay. And so Pastor Tainwini went with me. I said, will this cause you any trouble? He had been in jail and beaten with steel rods 4 separate times for preaching and for starting his church and school without government permission. He said, I may face a small time of unpleasantness. That's what he said. And I'm thinking, this is a soldier. So we got in the car, we gassed up by siphoning gas out of somebody's backyard tank, literally. And we kept going, we got out of town, and Tainwini said, Baji, I keep calling myself Baji. That's what they call me now. The leader of the country has given me the nickname Baji Bob. I'll explain that. But he said, Brother Bob, they will take you again. I said, what? He said, they will take you again. I said, they're waiting outside town. I heard them talk. I said, is there another way for us to go? He said, yeah, up over the mountain and this and that. He said, but he said, long, long ways. I said, well, better than them taking me again. He said, okay. So in the darkness now, we are up in the mountains. And long story, I've got a book coming out in September that has dozens of real-life true stories. Dr. David Gibbs of Christian Law Association got in my face last year, and he said, Bazi, he said, where's the book? He said, you really need to put your stories in a book. So I've been working on that, but one of the stories in that book is how we were up on that mountain and almost got eaten by a lion. Just trying to go to the bathroom by the side of the road. And, but anyway, we got back in that Toyota Corolla with the natural air conditioning between your legs, and we finally made it back to Rangoon. It took us all that night and all that day and the next night, and finally got back to Rangoon, safe and sound. I was sleeping in my hotel, 3 o'clock in the morning, and here come the military police, and they are going to interrogate me again. And so they took me overnight, and long story short, folks, I came back to America with one of those Burmese pastors of the underground church. I bought him a ticket, brought him back here, and my thought was, I'm just going to get him a little support, missionary support, and send him back and go on with Solid Rock Youth Ministries, because I'm really happy doing that. I love kids, you know, because I'm surrounded by them. My wife has a daycare with 16 rugrats Monday through Friday. When I sit down in my grumpy chair, which is what my daughters call it, you know, my recliner, where I don't want to be disturbed, all the daycare kids jump in my lap, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Bobby, you know. I'm surrounded by kids. I love kids. But anyway, my idea was to send it back, and I would go on with Solid Rock Youth Ministries, and everything would be okay. But that's not what God wanted. And I didn't understand it. But folks, I started Golden Land Baptist Missions, ministry of the Lighthouse Baptist Church in Horseheads, New York. Golden Land Baptist Missions. And we now, after 12 years, we now have, I'm working with over 200 preachers in Burma. We started, I just got back from Burma last month. My newsletter, I'll give you one out, I've got some out in the car, I think, but over 200 preachers. We started 2 just last month, 2 more. I have a Bible college in Rangoon, which is now called Yangon. Big city, 9.5 million Buddhists and Muslims. And that's Cornerstone Baptist College there in Yangon. I have 6 schools, 6 different schools in Burma, all over the map. North and south, east and west. And 400 orphans that we are taking care of completely. When I was there last August, I bought 6 truckloads of rice. Semi-tractor trailer loads of rice. And so I go back and forth. Sometimes I'm in, sometimes I'm here, sometimes I'm there. But I'm the only one that's raising funds for this thing. Can I tell you, it takes a lot of rice. It takes a lot of rice, both literally and figuratively, to do this work, brother. And so I go everywhere preaching and singing and raising money and conferences, Sword of the Lord conference and all kinds of things, just trying to tell about my people. And people say, oh, we'll pray for you, Brother Bob. I say, forget about me. I'm blessed. Pray for my people. Pray for my people, because they need Christ. And Buddhism, there's no hope in Buddhism.
That's right.
They have all of these temples that tower to the sky. They pray to these stone gods and wooden statues and pour water over Buddha's head to wash away their sins, but they have no peace and no hope. Amazing things have happened. In the last 12 years, I can't begin to tell you how many people have been saved and how many, I've baptized so many. We had a mass river baptism of over 300 new believers in the Ayavati River. Some people call it the Irrawaddy River, but God has blessed them just an amazing way. I'm going to tell you a couple of little stories as I give you some scripture this morning real quick, and then we're going to go to the house. But thank you for serving the Lord. Thank you, Brother Grady, for continuing to serve the Lord. Mrs. Meadows, thank you for just keeping it going. Preacher, thank you for serving the Lord. And there is some pockets of revival across America.
Amen.
I've seen it.
Praise God.
Been in a lot of meetings, big and small. I'm a song leader, I'm a soloist, a lot of different things, but I've seen thousands, and I've seen just 10 or 20 places, people that love the Lord, and some that are just going big, great guns, and some that are holding on. But just keep holding on, you know, and pray and seek the Lord's face and ask Him to bless. Now, this is His church, yes or no?
Yes, right.
This is His church. It's not Brother Grady's. It's not preachers. It's not yours. It belongs to the Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And He said the gates of hell would not prevail against it. You know? And so I see you got some missionaries still on the board back there. I know that you lost Brother Jim a while ago. So God bless you for just hanging in there and keep going. You know? Matthew chapter 18. Can I give you a thought this morning? Matthew and chapter 18. I really would like to read the entire chapter, but for time's sake we won't do that. I think you're probably very familiar with the story in Matthew chapter 18. When I think of Matthew chapter 18, I think about those verses that apply so much to the church and how the church was begun. But I want to bring your attention to verses 12 through 14. Verses 12 through 14. And probably very familiar to you. Matthew 18. I'm going to let you remain seated and just listen as I read. Jesus said this, "How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and goeth into the mountains, and seeketh that which is gone astray? And if so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep, the one that went astray, than of the 99 which went not astray." That was a problem for the brother of the prodigal. Remember? He says, "I've been here the whole time, but you're rejoicing more over my brother who went out and spent his inheritance with riotous living, and I've been here serving you all this time, you know?" But can I tell you this morning, yes, the Lord loves you and loves Temple Baptist Church, but He is still about people who need the Lord.
Amen.
And if there would be just one child or one person, one grandma, somebody that would walk this aisle and give their heart to Christ at this old-fashioned altar, man, the angels would sing and shout all over glory, and hopefully we would too.
Amen.
But that's what we need.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
And my church, your church, every church, we need souls to be saved.
Amen.
And I know people in America, they don't think they need God anymore. They don't think that He's relevant anymore. We're just so cotton-picking blessed that we don't need the blesser anymore. And that's a wicked thing, isn't it?
Amen.
But it is how it is in America. Now I go to Burma and the people are poor. But they take their hard-earned money, and I mean they earn a little cash in the hand one day. They go buy some groceries and feed their family. That takes care of them this day. Whatever pennies, they call them chats. Whatever chats or pennies they have left, they go and buy something, maybe a flower to hang on an idol, and they pray to the spirit of an ancestor or to some spirit that lives in a tree somewhere, because animism and Buddhism have intermingled these days. And so they don't even know who they're praying to. And they have so many needs. And they may have a little handful of rice and a couple of, maybe a little vegetable, you know. But you know what? They're happy.
Amen.
And they're joyous, and they you know what?